Dr. Nikore, what was the most surprising crossover between your work at IBM developing e-commerce products and the six hats you wear now?
Many different crossovers. So, first, naturally, much of the work that I do now, it centers around innovation and technology, and obviously being at IBM, the natural crossover from that perspective. And then, more specifically, what we're doing at Homecare Hub, we're really creating a seamless backend experience and payment platform and experience for our partners, which is exactly what I was programming on and in the guts many years ago. And when I think about things like TD, we're the second largest bank in Canada, one of the biggest companies in the country with a global presence. And my job is to think about their health and wellness. And while I'm a doctor, of course, I can think of it from that perspective. It's been really helpful, actually, having spent time as an employee at IBM at such a large organization to have that perspective. And then, of course, lastly, as a clinician, you know, at IBM, I'm programming, I'm doing logic, algorithms in my head all the time. And I find myself as an internist, performing a lot of those same sort of logic and algorithms along the way as well.
hmm Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know how you balance everything and manage to maintain kind of six different hats at the same time. But regardless, we'll dig into that later. Welcome to How It's Meant, the podcast where we chat with people who are shaping the future of healthcare and health tech. Boy, howdy, do we have so much to talk about today with the absolutely unrivaled Dr. Vipan Nikore, currently CEO of Homecare Hub, and so much more. I'm not going to go into it. You can check out his LinkedIn. It is ridiculous. Vipin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me here. And I got to commend you. It's a really great initiative that you've put together with your podcast here. And thank you for staying on me. I feel terrible. It took you a while to get me, but like
Good.
any great entrepreneur, you stuck with it. And I'm, I just genuinely apologize for the delay. I know it's been a while. So thank you, Jeff. And yeah, just keep up the great work you've been doing. So
Oh, good. I appreciate that you made time for this, regardless of the fact that you do so much. But let's take it all the way back to the days of "I Want It That Way" by the Backstreet Boys, otherwise known as 1999, when I was 2 years old. So I really have to date you there. You started at Citibank, Sun Microsystems, then IBM. Why did you bounce around so many different companies?
yeah, well, thank you for aging me. But yeah, going back to that time, way back, really wasn't it wasn't really a change. It was more of a like I was actually just doing summer internships at Citibank and Sun Microsystems. So for me, I've always believed internships are a great opportunity to get a really sneak preview into various companies and experiences. So that was really the main reason for multiple companies. So when I graduated undergrad, I did have an offer to go back to Silicon Valley and go to Sun Microsystems, and they were behemoth way back during the olden days, as you would call them. But I had a really great offer at IBM here in Toronto, and after being away at undergrad, wanted to stick around near my parents and family. And again, had some cool projects I was working on here. So
hmm IBM was back then, and in a lot of business case studies, a innovation giant. What was the favorite, I guess, project that you worked on back then that you still remember and reference to this day?
good question. Good question. So back then, and it's interesting. I'll get into some of the transition a bit later. It was really fascinating working on real world projects. So I was focused on WebSphere Business Edition, basically their WebSphere Commerce Suite, uh, working on the again for all these different major companies. And think about this too. This is shortly after .com, but like during the .com boom, right? So companies, Versace, whoever it was, they're all going on online and using our products. So I was just coming out of undergrad. I thought it was super interesting to just work on, uh, you know, technology that was going to be used by, millions of different people through the IBM's backend. So
hmm hmm I mean, it seems like a lot of the tech that you helped build shaped the world that we know of today, an extremely commercialized internet. which I guess to some extent starts to, I guess, compare to how healthcare has begun to evolve over the past decades or so. But regardless, to get back into the conversation that I want to lead, you didn't only work in terms of kind of software development and payment systems. You did a lot of work between tech and health back then. So your work post IT days was still embedded in the interaction between health and tech, and a lot of these projects had to do with underserved populations, which is kind of a straight left turn from what you referenced just now. Why?
Yeah, great question. For me, it's always just been in my DNA to sort of give back and help those less fortunate and just approach life with empathy and compassion. And, personally, I've always just been very grateful for everything I've been given. And when you look at the world society today, most of the wealth lies within the wealthiest 1% of society. And it's really not right. So for me, for as long as I've been able to remember, my focus in my career has always been to, create a more equitable society, and that we should live in a world where, healthcare, access to food, clean water, education, housing, everyone should have that. So I've always, that was a decision I made early on that I want to dedicate myself to those issues. And early on when I was in technology, that was always the goal. I love programming. I could program like 30, 40. I programmed like 50, 60 hours straight before back in the day. So I love it. I love the logic, the puzzles. I love math. But the reality is I really saw technology, especially during that time as it was emerging, as an opportunity to really make a great impact. So for me, it didn't feel lateral at all. It was just using a different means to accomplish the same thing.
Hmm. Can you or do you feel comfortable explaining what exact experiences led you to believe so strongly in health equity? I feel like during the dot-com boom and the subsequent years, it would have been so easy to just move down to Silicon Valley, explode with the startup scene, and just make it so that you can use the resources and the community to make an impact from top down. Whereas you chose instead to focus on health equity. So there must have been some experience that really struck you to the core when you were developing that, shaped the way and shapes the way that you think.
Yeah, great question. For me, again, it was always sort of in my DNA. So I always knew that, contributing to causes, improving our society was to me, I come from, largely physicians in my family. So, healthcare's always been in my DNA. Um, so, but at the time when I was programming, it wasn't healthcare I was most specifically interested in. I was very much, like I said, zoned in on tech. It could have been helping in so many different ways. But what really helped me make the move to health tech from sort of general technology, and then, ultimately med school, et cetera, as well, was when I actually was at IBM. There were some amazing parts about being at IBM, but you're also, you're one person in this massive organization, right? And you're working on a very small piece of the puzzle amongst many others to create, great impact. And, I started, looking around the room and I saw people who just, they love technology for loving technology. They were so excited about, the newest version of Java that came out, right? And I thought that was cool, but that didn't get me excited, right? And if I want to be the best at what I do, I need to be really excited about what I do. And that really made me think about what do I want to have at my core, which really led me to healthcare, because I just think healthcare is a tremendous field that offers so much and so much good you can do, and it's dynamic and so much to learn and different paths you can take in your career. So I think that was really the most important kind of insight along the way that made me sort of make the move there.
Hmm.
And
I, I
admittedly, one other thing too, at that time too, there was, I don't want to say we were in fantasy land a little bit, but when I was a student, this is late 90s, and there was this almost naivety around, you go into tech and you do a startup and then goes IPO and then you start your own, and then you're going to retire by 30, and then I'm going to go start these nonprofits and do all these things, right? And that was sort of a naive view of the world, right? And the dot-com boom started coming down. There was the crash, and you started to see a little bit of this reality, and you're like, well, this isn't necessarily the normal path, right? And that made me also think about, what do I want to do the next, you know, 50, 70, 80 years of my life and center my core around.
Hmm. I agree that addressing health inequities is one of the best ways that you can address inequality and inequity overall. And you've worked so long in this space overall between health and tech and addressing inequalities and inequities that I think the next question really suits you well. So, what are the unique challenges that underserved populations, as far as you've seen, face in accessing quality healthcare? And what will be, in your perspective, the most effective solutions to these problems?
Yeah, it's this is a whole podcast on its own, and but at a high level here, access to diagnostics and diagnostic infrastructure. That's absolutely huge. Having worked as a clinician in multiple countries, access to health professionals. I've seen people, um, you know, pass away in front of my eye because, well, they don't have the diagnostics. We're in the middle of nowhere, and I'm concerned they may have a bleed in their head, and there's no CT scan. Obviously, that's terrible. But even if we had the CT scan, well, who's going to be able to operate on them,
Yeah.
right?
What are you going to do?
Right? So like it's really a puzzle to put all the pieces together. So diagnostics, health professionals, lack of access to technology, of course. And then of course, public health issues are all all critical, like clean water access, misinformation. There's so many things from a pure public health standpoint that we really need to focus on as well. And I should know we're starting to see innovations, right, from various uh, underserved areas. We're seeing some of these technologies, they're going to leapfrog some of the technologies we have here, right? And we're going to export them import them into North America as well, whether it's, drones delivering blood, et cetera, or different things that they've had to get right because of the lack of resources there. So I think that's something to keep a lookout for in the years ahead. Most importantly, there really needs to be more capital for these communities, right? Need to really build an entire local health infrastructure. You need more local health professionals who come from the communities. You need to create a culture of quality and safety. And when I was over at MIT working on some of the global health work that we used to do and across the globe, our team, we used to say this a lot, that more access to poor quality, unsafe care is not helpful, right? So you really need to build a culture of quality and safety in these, in the communities, and then you can improve the access and improve the care.
Hmm. Hmm. I guess two questions that come from what you've just said. How do you build a culture of access with quality without necessarily being extremely paternalistic, or even as what was done before, parachuting in, providing care, and then going out? Is there a specific formula, or is it kind of a case by case basis?
I think it is a case by case basis, and I wish I had all the answers to this as well. Um, I don't have the greatest solutions, but I do think that the more of an emphasis just on the concept um, of how important it is, and bringing in quality training, bringing in, having programs where people have access to understanding, how to improve quality in health systems. That itself is a great start. I obviously, IHI does great work, North America and across the world. The more access there is to institutions like IHI, et cetera, and also local institutions that are similar to IHI, right? That's Institute for Health Improvement for people who aren't aware. That's going to help move the needle. People have to ingrain it in their systems. It can also come through, their own medical institutions. Again, local medical institutions. That's who's training the next generation of
Hmm.
clinicians and health professionals. And I can tell you, I've worked with so many practitioners, they're phenomenal. Uh, and I can tell you, just great talents. And if we could bring more, again, just like you said, we don't want to sound paternalistic, but work with uh, more sort of global collaborations so that countries can learn from each other and bring ideas. And some areas are doing quality great, some areas are not, right? And if they can learn from each other, it doesn't have to be me going to them, but could be one area of one continent working with another area of a continent and learning from each other.
hmm One other thing that you mentioned in your first little spiel was providing access there. So that provides a bit of sense of distance, or it implies that at least. I know that inner cities, having worked in various inner city hospitals, also face their own challenges with regard to health access. Are the same challenges present in inner cities, in your perspective, as there are in less resource settings, in, for example, rural settings or countries with less money to spend on healthcare overall?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the first projects I worked on was way back after I left IBM. I was at UCLA where I was working in health informatics and working on telehealth projects for areas of South Central, et cetera, where we were doing ophthalmology screening, et cetera, and various vision screening and providing ophthalmology access, I should say, to some of the communities there. And this is over 20 years ago, right? So that was then, and it still remains true now. There are great opportunities. There's so much data showing, the life expectancy differences between people who are in literally adjacent area codes, right? So just by being in a city, it doesn't mean they're getting world-class healthcare, even if they're in close proximity to it. So.
hmm We've talked so much so far about some of the discrepancies in healthcare quality so far, but what's your favorite story to tell with regard to health IT projects that have shown benefit for those who are underserved?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of cool projects. I've studied a lot of cool projects
Choose one.
over the years. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to start with a non-health tech project because I think it's
Okay.
important to just understand the impact that we have. Doesn't have to be always tech related. It doesn't, innovation doesn't always mean technology. Yes, technology plays a key role in innovation in many manners, but I love to highlight, a colleague of mine or a mentee of mine, Sam, who's down in Haiti, a medical student down there. Remarkable story and inspiration he's been, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But there was a time he was working with an organization, a public health organization in Haiti, and I believe it was cholera. There were a lot of patients coming with cholera and symptoms of cholera, and they would be treating them. And he just said one day, you know what? I'm going to take a megaphone and go down to the community and start educating people. He educated the people, kept educating the people, and before long, there were no more patients because he had taught them about washing hands and all the other public health measures, et cetera. And that solved the problem, right? That wasn't a highly technical project, right? So I think that I love that story, and I know this is a health tech podcast, so I got to throw a couple plugs on some cool projects that are tech related. I think what we've done with TB, that's been really important. We've built really strong information systems, which has uh, helped us in our fight with TB. And my colleague Hamish Fraser, who was at Partners in Health, he's done a lot of great work in that area over the years. I'm excited by point of care diagnostics, remote patient monitoring, telehealth in general. I mentioned sort of drones earlier. There's so many different projects. A clinical uh, experience I had down in Peru when we caught a gastric cancer and we had a GI doc come down. Essentially, had a mobile endoscopy clinic that we brought up, and we saved that lady's life. So I mean, so many stories, so many technologies. A couple little tidbits there, though.
hmm You also mentioned off the air when we first chatted that despite your immense focus on health IT before, you approached your medical training and residency with an open mind to not continue work specifically in health IT. Why did you approach, I guess, these levels of training with this open mind?
Yeah, I think having an open mindset was really important, particularly for me, and really exploring. As a background, we probably gathered this already, but I was pretty zoned in during undergrad days on technology and computer science and software engineering, etc. I was out to be the best, and I was taking elective courses in and it was Cobalt to prepare for Y2K, right? Like I was pretty zoned in at the time. So, early in my medical career, what I didn't want to do was anchor myself to technology just because I was good at it and I was experienced and I had a leg up on it here. I really had other passions, around, working with youth and adolescent health and working in underserved communities and intersections of, education and homelessness. And I'd even actually, little known story, actually had got into journalism school for a master's program. I decided not to go in the
What?
end.
What?
Yeah, there's lots here, but I was always interested in the media to make to make a difference in public health difference. And so for me, I wanted to just go in open mind, make sure I knew tech would play a role, but I really wanted to say I'm going to do what I truly love to do, without anything, no anchor in tech, etc.
Hmm. I guess to push back on that, wouldn't that have necessitated giving up one of your greatest assets and skill sets? And what was your perspective with regard to that?
No, it's a great observation. So, and I should clarify, I approached with an open mind, but I never gave up on the technology, right? I knew I got into it originally for a reason. I knew there was a big role technology had to play, and I remained involved in many health tech projects. I mean, I was at the WHO in Geneva working in their e-health group, right? Like I was involved in projects the entire way. Guess what I'm saying? I just didn't go all in on technology day one of, medical school or business school, et cetera, when I had left the tech, right? Like I kind of always carved out time and I always kept an open mind to do other things, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Where I easily
Speaking,
could have said, "Hey, I'm good at technology. I like healthcare. I'm going right into health tech and I'm going all in on this." I
yeah,
didn't take that approach. I said, "Well, let's break up my time. I've got my health tech time and I've got buckets for 2, 3, 4 other things to sort of explore as well."
I guess my question to further that line of conversation is how did that impact where you've gone since? Was there a measurable impact, or do you just go back to your default? All right, I'm the health tech guy, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's easy to go back to that default mode. And ultimately, I've focused a lot of my career on innovation, which really is, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is centered around technology, right?
Hmm.
But, the term innovation, again, can come in different ways. It can be working with, um, in almost any field
Yeah,
of healthcare. And I demonstrated a non-tech example earlier of innovation, right? So, for me, I love technology. It's always going to play a key role in what I do. And I'm always going to have a mindset of how are we going to use technology to improve the system. But I guess I'm happy that I have a bit of a lens that's outside of it where I don't try to push technology into every solution, right? And I see that often in healthcare where there's people pushing a technology, uh, in a system and it doesn't work, right? And, for me to sort of have a little bit of a layer to say, it's okay not to use technology. I think that that's really been important in my career.
hmm I feel like for those who may not necessarily have as much native exposure to healthcare overall, it's very easy to say, hey, there's this interesting tech. I understand vaguely that there's healthcare problem. Let's try to fit the tech to the problem overall without necessarily digging deep enough to understand what the problem is. Um, this itself, in the greater overall picture, lends itself to a conversation about the diverging incentives between the health innovation sector and the actual, well, health innovation, I mean, like investments as well as health technology development sector, as well as actual health innovation when it comes to changing systems and making sure that we're able to, as your mentee in Haiti did, solve the problem from the beginning. So, how do you think we should, just off the top of your head, is probably not going to be a very well thought out answer, approach these divergent incentives?
Yeah, astute observation, and I think one of the keys to to solving for this generally is through collaboration. I wrote a blog a few years ago when I was at Lux Capital too, just on sort of failed IT projects and how you can make technology successful in healthcare, right? And I mentioned some examples in there around. I remember Leo Selly, who I had worked for at the MIT lab, and he's an ICU critical care doctor. And I remember him telling me, and I was sort of finishing residency, and he was telling me how his engineers would round with him on the wards, right? And those types of collaborations where you can help uh, people who maybe don't have the insights day to day into healthcare gain some of those insights. And it's important to note, you're not going to be able to round three times and like understand all of healthcare, but it does help, right? And it gives you a little bit of a sense of some of the realities. And then, just generally that cross collaboration of engineers working with, physicians in other areas and uh, you know, people of diverse skill sets working together is really important. And you do need to involve healthcare professionals. I see way too many times, too many failed projects because they just didn't engage healthcare professionals. It's funny because I'm part of all these different conversations. I'm involved on the tech side and then the management side and then the payment side and then the clinical side. And you sometimes see the same sort of topic circulated and just totally different discussions. There's people on one side saying, "Oh my gosh, doctors love this," and then I go to like a forum of doctors, or I'm going to go to ACP, which is American College of Physicians conference in a week or two. Like the conversation will be totally different there compared to another conference that I go to. It's remarkable. So I think it's a reflection of our inability right now to talk to each other, and we have to get a lot better at that. So.
hmm No, those extremely well informed. So I apologize for underestimating what you could pull out of the hat when I sprung that question on you. But speaking of underserved populations and perhaps solutions that don't necessarily deal with, higher technology, you've done some amazing non-tech work for inner city kids. Can you tell me a little bit about the story and the new and original goals behind Urban Future Leaders of the World, which has apparently since been renamed to Life, which is very hip, very cool. I appreciate the name.
Thank you, thank you. I had some younger people work with me on the rename to make it nice and hip, etc. So, but yeah, Urban Future Leaders of the World or UFLO, really big part of my life actually for many years. So, background on that, I left business school, and we sort of talked a little bit about some of my motivations prior to that. Really excited to change the world, and like it was just an inspiring 2 years when I was at Yale. Amazing classmates and what I learned, and um, of course, I didn't go out to change the world. I went to go to medical school, right? So it was a little bit of a different path. And they're like, go study this cell and know every single thing about it, right? So I had this sort of like inner yearning and craving to do things beyond that as well. But I really had to stay focused, of course. But I also knew I always wanted to do, entrepreneurship. Like even coming out of undergrad, we created this MP3 player. We were looking at this is way before Spotify, this MP3 player that locked down. So for me, I always knew I wanted to start something up and I had this yearning to, but doing that during medical school was not going to be an easy thing. And ultimately, I was looking for opportunities to start something impactful. And I had been very inspired by, Paul Farmer's work and what he'd been doing at a global scale and global health, partners in health in Haiti, et cetera. So I was looking for opportunities that came along, and I was a Schweitzer Fellow, which is a program across the U.S. So I was in medical school in Chicago, second year. They take health professional students to create and work on service projects in various communities, underserved communities in Chicago or whatever city the program's in, I created a adolescent health curriculum for low income uh, communities in Chicago, and I taught it at KIPP charter school. So I'd go teach about 3 hours of class Saturday mornings during med school in my second year, and we're at the same time doing a project at University of Illinois. And again, I was part of this track called Urban Medicine program again, where we focused on underserved communities, and we were going around, we're videotaping people as a part of a project, asking them what the biggest problems there were in their neighborhood, and how they feel they could be addressed, et cetera. And I decided one day, said, let me just interview some of my students as part of my UIC med school project at KIPP charter school. And I took some videos and asked them their problems, and their eyes lit up. And I remember, talking to one student, he was so passionate. He knew all the problems, and he was articulate. And, that really sparked something within me. And it helped me think more and more about it. Schweitzer program's amazing. I'm glad I'm going in and helping, and we're being empowered. Great experience. But it really made me realize that the problems are best solved by people in the community themselves, and that youth themselves have an opportunity and are very talented and should have a voice in terms of creating them. And then I started with a whole bunch of other layers, but I started studying gangs and how they create community, and I saw UFlow as a opportunity to create really like a family-like culture, right? Where the people as part of this team essentially would go out and create their own service projects. So we expanded it to, 5 cities. We had hundreds of volunteers over the years. So that was the story, something that was, something I hold dear to my heart for many years.
Yeah. Some of the teachings or learnings must have transferred over to some other work that you do, because a huge part of empowering youth is really teaching them to lead effectively, a task which, when done well, requires a big amount of emotional intelligence. You've kind of done the same at U of T. Can you tell me more about this vein of work?
Yeah, teaching leadership, something that I've done, for medical students for a long time, and I'm lucky. I had a great mentor in medical school, Dr. Dave Mayer. He used to teach, all a lot of the soft skills as well. He had done a lot of patient safety initiatives, really a world leader in this, and he was teaching leadership and emotional intelligence and other things at in med school when I was a first year, and I was super excited. I just come from business school. I had already, learned a lot of principles and leadership, and I kind of approached him and talked to him, and he gave me an opportunity when I was a second year to really teach all the med students at UIC. So I got very lucky. So I started teaching. This is over 15 years ago when I was when I was a med student, and then I kind of carried that through my career. And here at University of Toronto, the last 9 years, I've been teaching all the med students, a couple classes on leadership and emotional intelligence, and we've continued to evolve the curriculum. And now I bring in various mentors, leadership mentors, who sort of teach my curriculum, various techniques and principles to smaller groups of students. So yeah, it's been exciting. I really love doing it. It's funny, I mentioned I bring in mentors. Some of these mentors are like CEOs of hospitals, like Andy Smith from Sunnybrook, and other amazing leaders. I mean, they don't need to learn anything from me, right? People that I really look up to as leaders. So I'm lucky that they've sort of agreed to help out in this capacity, and yeah, been a fun part of my career.
What drives this, or what continues to drive this, I guess, push to teach leadership and emotional intelligence? From my perspective, I think that it's especially relevant given the advent of newer tools that will allow for more of the diagnostic process to be done with the aid of AI algorithms, intake forms, etc. So does that inform the urgency with which you're pushing these teaching? Or is your motivation purely from the perspective of what you've learned before?
Jeff, you're just going to have to take the class to learn why we're doing
Oh,
it.
come on.
That's when we spend the first few minutes of the class talking about why leadership is so important in healthcare. So you'll just have to take the class. In all seriousness, you hit the nail on the head on really around the need for leaders. Again, it's a longer answer, but very briefly, there's a need. We need leaders in healthcare. Uh, and I teach this to the physicians specifically. For physicians we have in leadership roles is going to be only helpful for us as a system. There's so many problems and daunting problems. I talked about the lack of sort of communication between different parties. And if physicians took on leadership roles, we desperately need them. On the emotional intelligence side, it's interesting, you have top athletes who, have coaches on emotional intelligence. And, us physicians, we're dealing with people's lives. And I bring in examples of how, the teaching of emotional intelligence, really, it's the difference between life and death, right? So this is really important stuff for our medical training, and it's largely been neglected. So that's one other motivation for me. Well,
Hmm. Okay. So take a bit of a pivot. You've made some pretty impactful statements as the chief medical officer of TD Bank. And on brand with you and the work that you've done before is the work that you mentioned supporting through TD's ready commitment to its communities. What's the best way that you would summarize the favorite parts of your work in such an unconventional role?
yeah, I've really loved my role at TD. I'm now my fifth year or so at doing this work. And yeah, the TD team's been incredible to work with. What I do as their chief medical director, it's actually through a program at Cleveland Clinic, where we do this for over a dozen companies. And the idea is, Cleveland Clinics, I've been with them now 13 years. And uh, if you're going to get consulting and you want advisory on health, it makes sense that you have a Cleveland Clinic team helping you, right? So that's what we've been able to do uh, in some of the areas. Again, so many different areas I've touched on in across TD and the TD Ready commitment you mentioned, which is centered around our sort of giving back. And I was very involved on the healthcare focus that we have there. I'm involved in terms of what gets covered sometimes, doesn't, wellness strategies, what type of uh, innovations or pilots that we might work on, et cetera. And of course, public health issues, so many different ways. And in public health, of course, that includes COVID. So it was a very busy time during that time as well. So.
Hmm. So speaking of COVID, what was the COVID-19 pandemic experience like for you as someone who is steeped in so many different roles that were all touched by this life-changing and world-changing event?
Yeah, it was quite the time. Let's just say. I tell people, we ask organizations, et cetera, to have a pandemic plan. I did not have a personal pandemic plan. I was sort of already kind of stretched, and I hadn't been prepared for a world where all my different roles would grow overnight. So it was quite the couple of years, something certainly we'll never forget. And just to give you sort of context on 2020, I remember I was out was celebrating New Year's with the night before 2019, and thinking about the next week. I was on call in the hospital January 1st, and I was thinking, oh, it's gonna be a busy week ahead, and I'll get to rest up the week after. And so go to work. I'm on call all week, and then pretty much just worked nonstop from that January 1st date, not knowing what was going to happen, of course. And during that time, we talked about this too. Mohammed Asadi Laria, who I had been a mentor to, and I know he's a close friend of yours. And when the plane went down in Iran, that was just a few days after. So it was a really, tough time those first few days. And for those who don't know, just a remarkable human being. And he was an MD, PhD at U of T. I just written his letters to Stanford and a whole bunch of other places as well. Just incredible guy. So it was such a loss. And, that first week was just a blur from that perspective. And then probably just a couple days after that, I heard about what was happening in China. And then a couple days after that, I was just thrown right into the work at TD. And because we have a lot of employees who would come from, they were coming from China, or their family members were coming from China. So I was, of course, asked to find out what I should do, or what we should do as an organization. So, by January 15th, I was reviewing 50 to 100 cases every night, right? So for me, I was going nonstop every day, every weekend from mid-January throughout again, as mentioned, I was on call that first week, so it was just going and going. Um, so I really didn't take my first I worked like 180 straight days, because as a clinician, we were hit very hard in Peel in the Mississauga area as well, where I practice, and as an internist, that's our job. We take care of COVID
That's where the
patients.
airport is, right?
Yeah, it's not too far from there, exactly. So, yeah, it was we didn't have enough doctors, obviously, as we all know, so I was picking up extra shifts, extra weeks, was going on at TD. I mean, my role, 4 or 5 uh, in terms of time, of my, time at TD. So there was one week, I think I worked like 150 hours, that week. It was just a really, interesting time. I mean, for me, what really got me going was adrenaline. I got into medicine, and I'm an internist to be able to take care of this. So that really kept me going. And I saw it as sort of a short period of time in my life and just time to step up. And I kind of was like, oh, I guess it's like being a resident again, right? That's kind of yeah, what was going on in my head, which I know you can empathize with right now, Jeff. But yeah, and then it started getting more tiring. I'd say like second, third year, and obviously a lot of conversations that we'd have, around, teaching people to take the vaccine and some more difficult ones. It started to wear on me, after a couple of years, I would say. But, you know, like I said, yeah, it touched, as you can see, all different aspects of, my career. And I launched Home Care Hub February 2020, the month before too. So the sort of the launch, there was, I was doing hundreds of hours at TD, and then there was I'd be on call, at the hospital. It was quite the year. Let's just, couple years, let's just say.
Yeah, I mean, I have no clue how you made your way through that. Certainly, you're remarkable in your ability to handle all of that extra stress that came on out of the blue. By reflecting on those experiences and the sudden surge of work and the importance of the work that you do and have done and are doing. Um, how did the 2 3 years shape how you look at the rest of your career and the change that you want to make?
I'm still figuring it out, I think. I haven't had time to reflect yet. I think
Still,
I'm just
still chugging along.
still like, I just then get thrown right back into startup world. And so ask me in a couple years and I'll tell you how the last couple of years have shaped my career. I'm actually kind of being genuine here. I think it's kind of too fresh to sort of say,
Yeah.
uh, how it's, uh, affected my career yet. So.
Yeah. I mean, with everything that you do, I wouldn't be surprised that you don't necessarily have as much time as you would like to sit back and reflect and understand how things have shifted. But you mentioned Home Care Hub there. I'm quite interested as to what drove you to found that startup specifically because a lot of your work has been focused on youth and underserved populations before. Could you kind of explain your thinking as to why you did that?
Yeah, great question. As an internist, we take care of, uh, you know, really technically it's adult medicine, 18 and up, right? And I always thought I would be focused on that, 18-year-old, more adolescent type age group based on the work that I had done. That was sort of the career plan. And I still, do some of that work. But, ultimately, I'm an innovator. I'm out there to go solve the problems that I see are necessary to be solved. And as an internist, the reality is doing inpatient medicine as a hospitalist, you're dealing with a largely older adult population, right? Uh, Frail, patients who with multiple complex chronic conditions, right? So when I came back, I was doing 42 weeks clinically as a hospitalist, right? Which is a lot, when you're looking at hospitalist type work. And the wait times that we would have in our hospital, and they were outrageous, right? And I had come back from the States. I was down at Cleveland Clinic and other hospitals working, I was doing some other locums, et cetera. And I came back to Canada and I saw the length of stay of patients, you know, 50, 100, 300 days in it. My mind was blown. I said, what was going on? Is this a typo? Because, I would get calls from insurance companies after 10 days in the hospital saying, Dr. Nikore, why is this patient there? And I'd be like, well, they need 2 more days here. I'm the doctor seeing the patient. You're calling me from the middle of nowhere, trying to tell me how I should, why this person's here. It was a very different dynamic. When I came back to Canada, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Why are these people staying in the highest cost possible place for such a long period of time? And as people know, or ALC number, which is really the alternative level of care, basically patients that don't need to be in the hospital, sometimes 10-15%, doesn't make sense, right? So that's really what got my head thinking about our post-acute care system, how broken it was, how much we're going to be in trouble over the next 20-30 years if we don't do something to fix it. At the same time, I was reflecting on experiences where, my first patient at Jesse Brown VA, Chicago, on the clinical wards, fighting with this veteran to not go to a nursing home. I remember one of my first tasks was go discharge this patient, tell him he's got to go to a nursing home. And I spent like 30 minutes trying to convince him. And, I was a third-year med student, so I didn't realize that, I probably shouldn't spend 30 minutes to an hour trying to convince this guy, but I did that and I couldn't. And, those experiences stick with you and reminds you, nursing homes play an important role in our society, but there has to be better ways. We need to make our nursing homes better. We need to have a lot of alternatives other than nursing homes. We need to get people excited about, different care and housing places. Assisted living is very expensive. Typically, those are, often $10,000 a month, and moving care in the home on a one-on-one basis is very expensive endeavor as well. People underappreciate it. I know people who are spending $15,000-$20,000 a month on one-on-one home care in their home. So there had to be better solutions, and that's really what came together. I got together with Jay Vagela and Brian Kwan, who were old friends of mine, are lawyers. They run a home care agency, and they were seeing many problems in the home care space, combined with Rahim Lalani, my other co-founder, is a Waterloo Compsci developer, and he had developed some work in the dementia space through a nonprofit he started. So came around our passions, and we got down to business and created Homecare Hub.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very concise way of explaining a very complex problem that even in the ED reflects quite severely, because the emergency department is just bedlocked, and there are like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-hour waits because there's no beds. It's a systemic problem that's only going to get worse as healthcare needs arise. But to kind of describe very succinctly, as you're wanting to do, how could you summarize it in terms of what Homecare Hub does to a 5-year-old using mainly monosyllabic and bisyllabic words?
Absolutely. And I realized, actually, I just told you the drive to start Homecare Hub. I didn't really actually tell you what it was, but very brief. I had to explain to a 5-year-old. So 5-year-old's really young, Jeff. You realize, like
I do.
if you said 10 or 12, okay, 5 is small. So breaking it down for a 5-year-old, I'd say, Homecare Hub is about moving your grandparents in with your friends' grandparents so they can all live together and have fun and have people come in and take care of them. That's the way I would make it nice and simple.
Beautiful.
To maybe, make it for a 15-year-old or something, but what I'd say is we create small care homes on demand. So 2 to 12 people, same neighborhood. We create these small shared living and care homes. We do it, like I said, on demand, 30% cheaper, higher quality, new innovations, cultural language specific. So, 5 people who otherwise go to a nursing home, now they can stay right in their local community, hyper-local solutions.
That's awesome. So, I mean, your model for Homecare Hub is pretty unconventional overall. As you've mentioned, nursing homes and retirement homes really are popping up all over the place, provide different levels of care so that people aren't stuck at hospital, or when it's inappropriate, stuck at home, unable to take care of themselves because there's no one to take care of them at home. What have been your greatest success stories and struggles to date, specifically with Homecare Hub?
Yeah, so many here. But, yeah, I guess I'll start with some successes. That we helped through pandemic a lot. We couldn't create our shared living homes, but we had created a Expedia-like platform where we bring on home care agencies as an aggregator. That was also always part of our plan. We just started with that because of pandemic, et cetera. And we really proved that model out. We got very good at it. Within our first year, we had signed 25, 30 nursing home contracts. We were staffing nursing homes when they couldn't get any caregivers. We'd get them like 15, 16 caregivers within 48 hours with, interviewed, et cetera, with a decreased likelihood of them leaving as well. So it was, we had a lot of success during that time. So I'm really proud of our team, some of the pivots we had to make there and reshaping of our focus slightly. Now, as we've sort of gotten, I'm proud we've got a few of our homes going now. It's working great. I've had patients leave nursing homes and tell me that their depression has melted away since moving into our smaller care homes, and it's like a family here. So I've seen really great patient successes, and now at a bit of a bigger level. We're gonna soon have a press release of some of the funders in our round, and just a great group of um, investors, et cetera, that we're really excited about. One was just released yesterday. That Baycrest, which is one of the top dementia organizations in the world, has invested in us this round. So we're very proud of that. We were part of the AARP accelerator, which was again they're probably the largest senior organization in the world, out of DC. How proud of that. And then we're really excited to scale our solution actually across Wisconsin as well. We have the Freighter Health System we're partnering with, and we feel strongly we can really help them out of their post-acute care, that some of the challenges they've had. Wisconsin's lost more nursing homes than anywhere in the United States. And if we can solve it in that state, we think we can do it anywhere. So we're very excited about that. In terms of challenges, oh my gosh, like startup world, I told you, I've been planning to do this for like 20 years. I've mentored, hundreds of companies probably along the way, but until you do it, started a nonprofit, until you do it yourself, wow, or do things come up all the time. It's remarkable. So I have a laundry list of things, but, just to give you a couple, one struggle, I remember early on when it was just like a couple of us years before we even had product, I'm going in and, I'm kind of a hustler. I go in and I just, I'm very boots on the ground. I talk to people. I go to different companies. I remember I was in Mississauga and I was just talking to a supplier company. Anyways, won't get into all the details. And basically the guy just like threw me out, kicked me out. I was just like, and it's funny because that moment I had just been invited to come. It was actually, big event downtown. I couldn't make it. Actually, TD had asked me to come to an event with very senior people in government, and it was a last minute thing. I wasn't able to make it. Said, well, at least I'll be able to work on my business. And I'm like, I'm supposed to be meeting with like the deputy prime minister, but instead I'm getting kicked out of this local shop here. So, those things happen, along the way. There's just, so many things. I gotta be writing a book on this, hopefully one day. But, just generally, when you're selling a new vision, something it's interesting because small care homes have existed, right? So there's, to some extent, we're creating a platform. There's nothing new here. There's a lot of new innovations around it though, but people don't have something to anchor it like telemedicine to, right? Like you tell them that they know it, they get it, or I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It's really hard to sell people on a very new vision for a future to say, right now, I check off a box and people go to a nursing home. That's just what it is when I discharge someone as a clinician. And to say, well, we're going to create a whole new path that's never existed. That's hard. You're going up against resistance, and but we're up for it, and we're excited to do it. And we think we've got a formula to make it happen. So.
Hmm. You had mentioned this throughout your I guess statements a little in the past 5 to 10 minutes. But overall, what is your long-term 10 to 15 year vision for Home Care Hub overall?
Yeah, I mean, we're out to change the face of post-acute care, right? We're creating a national distributed network of these small care homes. We're going to put tens, hundreds of thousands of patients in these homes. families and patients, they're going to start to love the care and housing that we create. It's no more of this discharging someone to some facility that they're kicking and screaming and going to. And there'll always be a little bit of that because people, when they have to leave their home, there's always going to be a little bit of that. But largely speaking, people are going to be happy. People are going to age gracefully in our homes, and the whole world is going to change when we're done with this.
Awesome. I really hope that future does come to life. Before we close off, and I've really enjoyed conversation, do you have any particular pluggables to plug? I always want to make sure that our guests are able to at least share their passions or one project, maybe it's Home Care Hub, that they're very interested in sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I touch a lot of different parts of the health system. So if anything resonated here, reach out. But, obviously on the Home Care Hub side, we are, as I mentioned, closing around imminently here. If there's people interested, funds, et cetera, reach out ASAP to me. We're looking again for hospital partners, et cetera. We basically go where people are going to partner with us. We're in Wisconsin because they're an incredible partner. We have some other health systems we're about to partner with as well. We'll make those areas a priority with engaged partners who want us to help them solve their problem, right? So reach out. And then just general, another plug is just for people we mentioned young people to just sort of stick with things and follow your passions and have perseverance and, just keep remembering to stay true to your mission and find things that have positive impacts in people's lives. So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. You're an amazing host and keep up the wonderful work that you're doing. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you.